continue with our conversation. Essentially, it looks like to me Stephen Cox is a million times better than this Amy McGrath. And I think she also might have fucked up because Amy McGrath got Matt Jones fired from his radio show. Now, he has to do it, right? No, I don't know if that's true. He had power with that show, so that would have been a good thing he could have. So anyways, I'm going to start off with Amy McGrath, the opinions that I don't agree with, okay? So she's in favor of the war on drugs. She talks about treatment, but she's in favor of Richard Milhouse Nixon's war on drugs. She's also in favor of TPP. Amy McGrath says on marijuana that she needs to see the research on marijuana first. That's just like Hillary Rodham Quilton. So Amy McGrath doesn't believe in freedom. She doesn't believe that Kentuckians have a right to their own bodies. Amy McGrath will continue Kentucky's role as a slave state. There's, about a dozen freedom states in the United States. Canada's a freedom country. And if Amy McGrath gets her way, Kentucky will never legalize freedom. Marijuana, Gatewood Galbraith is way to the left of Amy McGrath on marijuana. She's the most liberal, progressive person in Kentucky? Bullshit. She's barely even progressive. So Amy McGrath is opposed to Bernie care. She is opposed to having universal health care, single payer. Just the government pays for it. You walk into a hospital, you go see a doctor, you get taken care of, then you walk out. Everything's paid for. She's opposed to this. So she's going to defend the ACA, Obamacare, and she's saying that she's for a public option, but she's kind of putting it in quotes, which I don't understand that. So I believe that Amy McGrath is opposed to single-payer health care, whereas Stephen Cox is 100% in favor of universal single-payer health care, like Bernie care. So Amy McGrath is opposed to Bernie care, and she's in favor of Obamacare, and for adding on a public option and a Medicare or Medicaid buy-in program at 55 years of age. So when it comes to Mitch McConnell and Amy McGrath, both of them will stop Bernie from getting us universal health care. Both of them will stop Bernie care. Amy McGrath will use the filibuster to make sure that Bernie Sanders doesn't get health care to all, 330 million Americans. So that's something to look out for there. So she doesn't want to get rid of the private insurance, right? So she wants a mixed system. Well, if you want to go ahead and get a mixed system, fine, but you're going to get, are you in favor of government health care? Hillary promised us the same bullshit. Obama promised us the same bullshit, and now here comes old Amy McGrath telling us she's going to get us a mixed plan, huh? Make sure the private corporations got a hand in our pockets, but can we have our own hands in our own pockets? Is that possible? So she's opposed to Bernie care in favor of Obamacare. So she's not progressive there. She's barely progressive. She says she's for a public option, but she puts it in quotes. The so-called public option. So-called public option. Why would you say it like that? So-called, because it is a public option. Government health insurance. You can buy private insurance or government health insurance. So Amy McGrath also said that she would have nominated Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court. And then later on she's going to apologize because she totally fucked it all up. So she's, bumbling and fumbling, and she's not doing good with these interviews. So Brett Kavanaugh, he's the second. 2 Supreme Court justices have been named onto, the Supreme Court by Trump. And Amy McGrath said that she would have nominated Brett Kavanaugh in one of these interviews. So, Amy McGrath, as the Honorable U.S. Senator from Kentucky, she said she would have supported it. So what's the difference? Mitch McConnell supported it. She would have supported it. She said that Christine Blasey Ford's testimony was credible, but Amy McGrath didn't think that the charges had disqualified him. Now, just rewind 2 years, 2017, she had said that Brett Kavanaugh seems to be against workers' rights, women's productive rights, consumer protections, and he's very partisan, in line with the conservatives, Neil Gorsuch and Samuel Alito. So if she had saw that 2 years ago, Brett Kavanaugh was opposed to workers' rights, opposed to women's reproductive rights, and opposed to consumer protections, Why the fuck would she say that it's okay to nominate him to the Supreme Court? She flip-flopped on Kavanaugh. Now that he's in a position of power, yeah, now he could do no wrong. But before, no, she would have stood strong. Yeah, as a House rep, but as a senator, I mean, this is more power we're going to give to Amy McGrath, who couldn't even beat Andy Barr. So Amy McGrath loses a House representative seat, and then because she lost, now we're going to elevate her to run against Mitch McConnell. It's like, well, since you lost this little tiny political race, why don't you go ahead and jump into, this gigantic political race? What kind of sense is this? This is not logical at all. So McGrath did mention that lifetime appointments, the Supreme Court, all those appointments are lifetime appointments, and she says that they're bullshit on their face. So there's a lot of things that she just really sucks at. Her foreign policy, she has not articulated a lot of things, but essentially, when it comes to Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning, where is she at on that? Where is she at on the Patriot Act? Where is she at on police brutality? So on foreign policy, Amy McGrath that's essentially, she's just riding on the coattails of her doing all these bomber campaigns. So she, 89 times went around, did some combat, flying in Afghanistan, blowing up, the Afghanistan people. So she went around killing a bunch of people in Afghanistan, and in exchange for knowing how to fly a plane and, killing a bunch of Afghanistan people, that's the reason she thinks she's qualified to. She's a political science major, so I'm sure she knows a little bit about here and there. And to her credit, she has articulated a lot of policy positions. She's really good on climate change, goes on and on with climate change. And so, she acknowledges that it exists. So does Stephen Cox. Stephen Cox says it exists, and we're, looking at an apocalypse right now. So his rhetoric is better, but they're both better on Trump when it comes to that. On foreign policy, she sucks because there's a lot of reasons she sucks. She hasn't talked about the Yemen genocide. She hasn't talked about the genocide in Myanmar. She hasn't opposed to the Venezuela war or the Iran war. She can dictate policy right now. She's in a position to dictate policy. So every time that Mitch McConnell makes the decision and Amy McGrath would have made a different decision, she could draw a nice, big, stark contrast, a nice, big, bright line. This is who I am. This is who he is. And she could do that with every single issue from here on out to the Senate race. She's got a bunch of war, like millions of dollars in her war chest. I heard she raised $2 million or $5 million or $7. She raised $9 million 2 years ago, and even with $9 million, which is $3 more than Andy Barr, she still lost. So she, typically if you have more money in your war chest, you win. So she ran against this hapless, feckless Andy Barr, just a rank-and-file Republican, is, not distinguished, not dynamic in any way, and she lost against him. And all he did was just run a bunch of campaigns saying, oh, she's too liberal, and they just ran that clip where she says, I'm the most progressive person in Kentucky. There's nobody more liberal or progressive than me. That's what she's telling people in Massachusetts. And, I'm guarantee I'm more liberal and progressive than her when it comes to matters of war and peace. So she doesn't talk. There's 27 forever wars right now. You want to talk about military? Let's get into the military. That's her big thing. Okay, what are we going to do in Yemen? What are we going to do in Myanmar? What are we going to do in the 20 shadow wars? We got some shit going on in Cameroon right now. Just highlight Cameroon. If Amy McGrath just started talking about Cameroon, that would get it at least into the forefront of some people's minds. She says Russia's our number one existential threat. So hello, Cold War, right? This is a brand new Cold War. Russia's our number one existential threat. I don't know, Russia, China, UK, France, they're all equally to me. Who knows which one's going to try to take us out? So Russia, we're going to go back to the 1980s. Hey, they want their foreign policy back, Amy McGrath. So that's Mitt Romney's foreign policy. So she says Russia is amping up the war in Syria, which is kind of right but also kind of wrong. So Russia is countering our aggression in Syria. Russia believes that the Syrian government has a right to defend, to run their own country, to run their own affairs. So they're opposed to regime change wars. So Russia is also countering the aggression, our aggression in Venezuela, and thank God that they're doing that. But we're also countering Russia's imperialism when it comes to Ukraine right now and Georgia, you know, a couple years ago. So that's just something, you know, superpowers do, right? If a superpower tries to invade another country and take their shit over, then another superpower stands up and says, well, you try to do some shit like that, we're going to finance, you know, the opposition. So she doesn't seem to understand foreign policy. She's, you know, this combat veteran. She loves Israel, you know, just too damn much. She doesn't have the same love for the Palestinian people. She's for the two-state solution, not a one secular state solution. She's going to maintain Israel's QME, their qualitative military edge. So their QME, maybe that's the reason why Palestine doesn't ever get a square deal. Because no matter what the deal is, Israel always has a qualitative military edge. You have, I just saw a report in Yemen, 2,300 or 230,000 are dead in Yemen. That's 1/4 of an Iraqi genocide, 1/10 of a Hitler genocide. So 230,000 people in Yemen are dead because of America, because of the American government, because the people allows the American government to get away with this shit. That's a genocide. So the Iraqi genocide was 1/10 of a Hitler genocide. 230,000 people. I mean, can you even, you know what, everybody freaked out about El Paso because what, 20, 30, 40 people died? Meanwhile, you got 230,000 people that's dead in Yemen. And the reason why, because Saudi Arabia is our ally. We sell them arms. Donald Trump has hotels in Saudi Arabia, so we got to protect the hotels and the plutocrats and all their, you know, the weapons industry. And Saudi Arabia is got their war going on in Yemen right now. One of the very first things that Donald Trump did when he got office was bomb an American girl, a 9-year-old American girl when he got into office. Just bombed and killed the crap out of her because she was related to her dad was a terrorist or some shit. So a little 8-year-old girl got shot in the neck and she's just bleeding all over the place. So that's, you know, within just a day or two, and nobody claimed any credit. That's CIA, but it wasn't. Who knows? Nobody knows who, you know, killed that 8-year-old girl in Yemen. But that's been going on since Donald started. So you got the 27 forever wars. He hasn't ended a single war. He's trying to do some shit with Korea, but there's 27, okay? There's 27 wars. And Korea was, you know, that's like some shit that happened a long time ago, so it's not really a war, but there is a sort of an impasse there. So he was supposed to be the peace president, right? He was the one that was opposed to the Iraq war. He said that Bush has lied to us, and yet he's still perpetuating the Iraq war. So these fucking hypocrites, they'll tell you that those people who conducted those wars are wrong, but as soon as they sit in the chair of power, then they're like, well, I won't end the war, I'll conduct the war the correct way. There's a genocide in Myanmar, there's a genocide in Yemen, and yet we're supposed to believe that we're going into Venezuela to fight for their humanity. We're supposed to believe that, you know, we withhold the food and the medicine from Venezuela. That's how you know the bad guys who keep food and humanitarian aid and medicine from going into the people, yeah, those are the people. So that just happened recently with the soy. So there's, you know, in Panama, they went ahead and made sure no food is going into Venezuela. So either there is a naval blockade or it's in the works. It'll be just like the children in the cages. About a month from now, somebody gets the pictures of the Navy being out in the middle of the ocean, and they'll say, see, there is a blockade. So he's floated the idea. He wants to do it. He's antsy. He's a war president. He's got, you know, unlimited war powers. He just got his war, you know, border wall funding. He has to get another Supreme Court case, I think, but he got, you know, $2.5 billion. So from military spending, he's a war president. If it's in the name of the war, he can essentially do as the fuck as he pleases. On Amy McGrath, so those are my criticisms of Amy McGrath. Her foreign policy has got much to be desired, not very articulate, loves Israel too much, says Russia's the #1 threat, doesn't talk about anything else that's going on. She's anti-Bernie care, pro-Obamacare, but anti-Bernie care, so she wants to protect the private health insurance companies. She would have nominated Brett Kavanaugh, or maybe not, who knows. Nobody knows exactly what the hell she thinks about Brett Kavanaugh. She does, you know, said lifetime appointments on the Supreme Court are bullshit on their face. She says that on marijuana, she needs to see the research on marijuana. She's in favor of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that Obama, you know, the whatever trade agreement that Trump was opposed to and a lot of progressives were opposed to. And then she's also in favor of the war on drugs. So, okay, good, we're going to have another Nixon in there. So she's going to write legislation that's, what, consistent with Nixon? Now, on gun control, I'm not a progressive on gun control. Or maybe I am. I don't know. It depends on how you want to define it. I defend the Second Amendment because there's 50 freedoms in the Constitution. You're going to take away my right to defend myself. You're going to, take the people's power away. And then there's 50 other freedoms. Which other freedoms are you going to take away? And then also, there's self-defense, there's freedom, and then there's, a million other progressive shit that's happening. So a bunch of middle-class assholes, your Hillary Clintons and your Rachel Maddow's, they'll push for gun control because they're neoliberals, they're middle class, they're upper elite. They don't get worked up over police brutality or war or poverty or homelessness. They don't give a shit about, that shit. People worrying about the rent and, skipping Christmas to have to pay the electric bill. They're middle class. So for middle class people, for Rachel Maddow and Hillary Clinton, those are multi-millionaires. So for middle class, multi-millionaire liberals, well, yeah, gun control is an issue to them, but, poverty is a death sentence. Homelessness is a death sentence. There's a lot of crises that's happening right now. And if you're the victim of police brutality and the system just, keeps on dumping on you, no matter what, in Alabama for 10 years, they were sitting there planting guns and drugs on black folks for 10 years. So for 10 years, those people's lives are fucked. And we need a restitution. We need rectification and restitution on that issue right away. Is that going to happen? Or are we going to, pretend like it all didn't happen? So, shit, middle-class liberals are scared of the Second Amendment, but not the forever wars, not the endless forever wars, not child abuse. Nobody ever says, how come, these kids who had violence inside the home turn out to be violent people? Huh. I wonder if it's because there was violence in the home and that their parents taught them that might is right and violence is how you take care of your problems. Don't use your words, use violence, right, if you're in favor of corporal punishment. So when it comes to gun control, I'm opposed to it, but, some progressives are for it. Say la vie, say what, whatever. So I don't know. I like the spirit of it, the heart of it. And give me a Bernie Sanders, and then I'll be okay with gun control. She got 13% from the NRA. So the NRA doesn't like her. So that's, for a Democrat, that's good for a Democrat, right? I'm not sure if that's good for Kentucky, and I know that a lot of Kentuckians do believe in the Second Amendment. A 19-year-old can't buy a beer or a handgun, but they can buy an AR-15. So that's one of her quotes. So it looks to me she's hinting that she's going to push for an assault weapons ban. So she seems to think it's crazy. There's federal laws that would prevent a 19-year-old from buying a handgun, but they're allowed to buy an AR-15. So she's in favor of background checks. She's in favor of barring purchasing, abolishing barring purchases from everybody on the no-fly or watch list. Keep guns out of the hands of the felons and the domestic abusers and the mentally ill. And then she wants the funding for the CDC and the NIH to study the epidemic, the gun epidemic. So she seems to suggest she wants to eliminate concealed carry, establish a national database to track all the Americans and how many guns they have so they know the exact number, the exact pinpoint, a single. If you're going to take everybody's guns away, you got to make sure you know exactly where everybody's guns are. Assault weapons ban, high-capacity magazine ban. So she believes in a lot of gun control. She believes in a ton of gun control. She says she respects the constitutional issues at stake, but I don't think she understands the fundamental point of the Second Amendment. The fundamental point of the Second Amendment is that you cannot oppress an armed population. You can't oppress the armed population. Hitler, Mao, Stalin, they all took the fucking guns. Alex Jones is right. They took the fucking guns because once you take the guns, well, then you could just have, a massacre, right? You could just have yourself a Wounded Knee massacre. You could just go ahead and, just have a... Anyway, so Amy McGrath, to her credit, she's articulated a few issues, so she's written these nice little policy statements. I think when I read the two, though, she just sounds kind of like, a professor, kind of like a stuck-up asshole, like she knows it all, and we just got to defer to her judgment. When I read Stephen Cox, on the other hand, he seems like he's more fun and playful, but at the same time, he's gone through hardship, and so, he still has that Einstein's sort of, boyish lust for life. So here's, she's got lots of progressive issues on her platform too. So Amy McGrath has a lot of good things going for her. She's pro-choice. And, they say it's blood red state, but it's a low turnout rate. So really, if Amy McGrath focused on Democrats getting the base out and getting new voters in, that new coalition would get her over the finish line. She doesn't need any Republicans. There's more Democrats than Republicans in Kentucky. So it's, in general, yeah, I guess you could say it's blood red, red, red. But that's because of the 13% that vote, they're all a bunch of conservative fucks. And they're telling everybody else not to vote and kicking them off the voter rolls and keeping it quiet, keeping it a secret, watching Fox News and getting all pissed off and then just getting their few buddies out to go vote. So she's pro-choice. She wants to reverse Citizens United. She admits that climate change is real. She seems to know a bunch about it. She wants to get back into the Paris Climate Agreement. She wants to invest in renewables. She's for the Family and Medical Insurance Leave Act. So that's Bernie Sanders-esque right there. So 12 weeks of paid maternity leave or sick leave. Family leave. So yeah, family or medical insurance leave. So 12 weeks. If you have a baby, you get 3 months off, so that way you can bond with the child. You don't have to get, right back up and go back to work. So that's, pretty cool. Admits that climate change is real. Reverse Citizens United. She wants to get politics. She wants to get money out of politics. She believes in the Disclose Act, H.R. 1134, the Koch Act, H.R. 1439, the Government by the People Act, H.R. 20. I feel like there should be more. Get foreign money out of the U.S. Elections Act, H.R. 1615. So those are 3 acts where she wants to get money out of politics. So she's very articulate and very specific about how she wants to get money out of politics. So look at the Disclose Act, H.R. 1134, Koch Act, H.R. 1439, get money, foreign money out of the U.S. Elections Act, H.R. 1615, and Government by the People Act. She's in favor of medical marijuana for war veterans with PTSD, and she says she's going to remove the marijuana from the list of Schedule I drugs. So that's decriminalization, but she sounds more like Joe Biden than Bernie Sanders. She sounds more like a neoliberal when it comes to marijuana. That was one of the main issues, war, poverty, marijuana, for me in 2016. So, she loses a lot right there. The research is still out, so she's in favor of some, legalization of marijuana, but she's not going to definitely push it for it. But she did say marijuana should be removed from Schedule I drugs, so that's a decriminalizing or towards legalization. She said research, right? So it's more decriminalization, more of a Joe Biden, and not a Tulsi Gabbard or a Bernie Sanders. More of a, Donald Trump. She's, just for a little bit of marijuana, but not, let people do what they want to their own bodies. She doesn't believe in, the Kentucky people having a right to their own bodies. So she's in favor of the war on drugs, and she's opposed to recreational marijuana being legalized. She seems to be for some medical marijuana for the war veterans, so for just one particular group of people, war veterans with PTSD, and she's going to take marijuana from the list of Schedule I drugs, but I'm not for sure precisely what that means for her. So that's at the very least decriminalization, right? So there's a little bit of hope, a little bit of leeway there. She says health care is a human right, so that's wonderful. She points out that the uninsured rate in Kentucky went from over 20% to under 5% with expanded Medicaid. So she realizes that government health care, Obamacare, had covered, a big portion of Kentucky people. 20% of the Kentucky people didn't have health care, and then Obama came, and now you only have 5% that don't have health care. And so the Republicans in Kentucky that are opposed to health care, like, fuck those 5%. Those 5% don't have health care, well, fuck them. We will fuck them over and make sure they never get health care. It's only 5%. So, we've almost got everybody covered, but, no, so conservatives are not in favor of Bernie care. So she's, the only liberal, not, progressive when it comes to health care. She recognizes that Medicare and Social Security were hard-fought battles, but she doesn't seem to recognize that their simplicity are what made them the 2 most popular social programs in U.S. history. Bernie care is very simplistic. You're an American citizen, well, then you get health care. Guaranteed, no matter what. That's good for, nationalism, if you're into that kind of shit. But that's good, you know, to be an American. You grow up in America, then that means you get, you know, hospital care. You get health care. You're an American? Okay, then we give a shit about your health. That's what the government would finally be saying under Bernie care. So Amy McGrath, she says that she's for the so-called public option. She says that she's for a Medicare buy-in program for those who are 55 years of age. Buy-in program, a Medicare buy-in, so you have to pay. I don't understand what that is. Now, she says the public option, she, you know, points out that it's the government that runs a health care insurance program, and then they compete with the private insurance groups. But she says so-called. The so-called public option. Why would she call the public option a so-called public option? Because she believes that government-run health care is actually socialized medicine. So she's, you know, articulated on theissues.org, said that she was in favor of the repeal of Obamacare. So at one point in time, she may have said something about repealing Obamacare. So who is she repealing Obamacare for? For the private insurance people or for, you know, the public? Is it for, you know, the public or for the corporations? Which side are you on, Amy McGrath? If you're repealing Obamacare for Bernie care, then I'll do that all day long. You're going to repeal Obamacare for what? What fucking reason could you be? Oh, because you hated that black president? I don't even know why a progressive, you know, for Bernie care or public. Anyways, okay, so I've talked enough about health care. How much time do I got? 4 more minutes. Okay, so the U.S., these are some other good things about Amy McGrath, okay? So she says that, you know, health care is a human right. She says, you know, she's for the public option. That's, you know, I think we probably could get to most people with the public option. So ultimately, I guess I don't care, but Bernie care is just so prevalent in our minds. Jump on fucking board and fuck everybody else. So the U.S. must strive to champion democracy, justice, equality, opportunity, and freedoms of speech, religion, and the press around the world. This is Amy McGrath on War and Peace. So she's got some interesting thoughts when it comes to war and peace. She says that we need to be, you know, have a center role when it comes to leading the world. When we lead the world, we need to champion certain values that make us all Americans, such as democracy, justice, equality, opportunity, freedoms of speech, religion, and the press. I agree with all those things. So I think that's a good thing, right? Unless you're trying to impose your way. Anyways, so she says that NATO is the partner of first resort, not last resort. I think NATO is a good ally. I think, you know, keeping Russia in check and any superpower in check should be, you know, that's a good goal for NATO. But then they overthrew Libya. I don't know. I guess I got some NATO. I don't know. They could be good and bad. Libya was bullshit, right? They overthrew Gaddafi because he was treating his countrymen, you know, just giving them all a bunch of money from his oil revenues, and they just got tired of his shit, right? So NATO is going to overthrow Libya, and now there's slaves in, you know, a slave trade in Libya right now. So that's not very good. Then defending Ukraine, that's very good. So she believes in freedom, democracy. She also says the rule of law. So that's amazing. The rule of law means the law applies to everybody, not just the poor, powerless, but also the rich and wealthy. When it comes to ISIS, she says that we can't just beat ISIS just purely by military, you know, force alone, you know, but by weakening the reasonings for the radicalization in the first place. So that's interesting. So there's reasons why ISIS forms and people join ISIS. So she's saying we need to win hearts and minds. We need to spread, you know, excuse me, speech, freedoms of speech and religion and the press, and essentially be, you know, a good role model for the goddamn world. She also mentions that she wants to re-enter the Iran deal. She suggests a naval blockade of North Korea and having a cyber war against their internet systems. So, you know, there's interesting ideas. I think essentially I'm on board with most of those. So, you know, she's not totally, you know, terrible. She's not the worst.